Greetings, Westminster. It's my privilege once again to bring a message from God's Word as we continue through this challenging season. Wanted to make a point reference to my hair, which the careful observer will notice has been cut. And no, I haven't gone to an underground hairdresser, but I'm married to my hairdresser, so I'm blessed with proper grooming for this occasion. Well, here we are enduring through week 7 of lockdown and national and global crisis situation. We've enjoyed a beautiful weekend here in Lancaster County, even as we are facing growing tensions nationwide as people protest lockdowns and quarantines, stay-at-home orders. We find ourselves encountering dividing lines with growing divisions nationally and locally. How do we as believers endure, exercising grace and patience for such a time as this? Well, to help us answer that, I want to return once again to the life of David, to look at how David responded to the news of Saul's death. And to do that, we want to read from 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening, for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And a little later on, verses 23 through 25, David sings this lament. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. You daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, you who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Well, as we just read in this passage, we see that David is genuinely grieved over Saul's death. That he's mourning not just for Jonathan, his beloved best friend, but even Saul, who was his murderous enemy. King Saul, who had a diabolical attitude towards David, wishing him ill intent. But despite all the persecution and the hardship David suffered, he expresses no bitterness. He's not gloating, but rather praises God for Saul's life and calls on Israel to praise the Lord for him as well. I believe what we see here in David, 1,000 years before Jesus uttered the command to love our enemies, a genuine example of loving one's enemy. Even despite all that David had suffered as an outcast, as a fugitive for the better part of a decade, all the hardship, persecution, and deprivation, David is not resentful. He is not gloating, but rather shows genuine empathy for Saul, a man who is deeply afflicted, who suffered spiritual warfare, mental illness, who no doubt brought sorrow upon himself, and yet David has compassion upon his enemy. And in this act of praise, in this act of honor, David actually helps bring healing and unity to a divided, hurting nation. David will even go on to praise the men of Jabesh Gilead, who enact a daring overnight raid to rescue the bodies of Saul and Jonathan from a Philistine walled city in order to give them a proper burial. And I believe that in doing this, David really demonstrates the spirit of Jesus when he calls us to love our enemies. And in John 15:9 we read, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples." Earlier this morning I had the privilege of being on a pastor's video conference call with Lancaster State Senator Scott Martin, just to learn how we can pray for him. And in fact, we spent some time praying for him and his colleagues in Harrisburg. And Senator Martin was pretty vulnerable with us, talking about just how challenging the situation is for our constituents. He shared that while some constituents are doing well, persevering through this, others are struggling. They're angry, they're fearful for their health, for their families, for their business and their welfare. And it was really a rich time just hearing from our senator and taking the time to pray for him, his family, his staff, especially that they would respond to anger with graciousness and patience. The gospel gives us the power to respond with grace and patience and difficulty when we're dealing with difficult people, when we may be attacked, when we're talking with people with whom we may disagree, even the way we respond to our enemies, whether real or imagined, whether those who consider us their enemies, that the gospel gives us the power to respond with the love of Christ in difficult situations. It gives us grace to endure, to persevere, to trust the Lord, to maintain our perspective, to wait patiently, to serve with boldness and compassion, so that Christ would be glorified, even in the midst of terrible difficulty. And it's my prayer for us today that God's grace, which truly is sufficient for us in all circumstances, would guide us with wisdom and understanding to love well for such a time as this.